Look closely at her robe. Two dragons rising out of crested waves. This is an emperor's cloak, a Qing imperial robe, and by Chinese court law, only one person on earth was allowed to wear it. The emperor himself. Gustav Klimt put it on a 20-year-old Jewish woman in Vienna. He couldn't have known in 1916 that 30 years later this would be the only Klimt portrait in the room to survive. This is Bildnis Elisabeth Lederer, the portrait of Elisabeth Lederer. Klimt began it in 1914 and obsessed over it for almost 2 years. Commissioned by Elizabeth's parents, August and Serena Lederer, the second wealthiest family in Vienna at the time, behind only the Rothschilds. They owned more Klimts than anyone alive. This was the daughter's portrait. It hung in their Vienna apartment until 1938. After the war, it returned to the family, then to Estée Lauder, heir Leonard Lauder, and hung for years on long-term loan at the National Gallery of Canada in Ottawa. In November 2025, it sold at Sotheby's for $236.4 million, the second most expensive painting ever sold at auction. But what makes the painting matter isn't the price. It's a question. Of the entire Lederer Klimt collection, dozens of paintings, some considered his greatest, this is one of the only ones still standing. The rest are ash. And the reason this one survived is one of the most disturbing accidents in art history. But before we get to that, let's look at what Klimt actually painted. Elisabeth is 20 years old. She stands in a flowing white dress, hands gently clasped, face composed and slightly turned. The pose is restrained, almost demure. And then there is the cloak. Notice how it falls over her shoulders. White silk against white silk, almost camouflaged. You have to look for it. 2 pale blue dragons rise on its hem, curling out of stylized waves. This is an authentic Qing imperial dragon robe, a longpao, and in the China of just a few decades earlier, a commoner wearing one could be executed for it. By then, Klimt was an obsessive collector of East Asian art. His estate held ukiyo-e prints, kimonos, Qing court robes, books on Asian design. He had been folding those motifs into his paintings for years. But this is the only Klimt portrait that gives a Western sitter imperial Chinese iconography. He gave it to Elisabeth. What I find extraordinary is the background, a deep blue tapestry of tiny figures from Chinese opera. Scholars, courtiers, soldiers, the size of thumbnails. Not decoration, a crowd. Elisabeth is standing in front of a stage. This is Klimt past his golden phase. The slabs of metallic leaf are gone. No kiss. No Adele Bloch-Bauer one. What replaces them is something quieter and stranger. A portrait built from quotations. A Vienna heiress, an emperor's robe, a Chinese opera behind her. It shouldn't work. Somehow it does. Klimt is in the last act of his career. Founder of the Vienna Secession. He's already weathered the scandals over the faculty paintings he made for the University of Vienna. He's 52 when he starts this canvas. He's also a man Vienna gossiped about constantly. Klimt never married. He lived with his mother most of his life. He was a serial philanderer who fathered at least 14 children by various models, almost none of whom he formally acknowledged. Remember that detail. It comes back. The Lederer Commission obsessed him. There's a story, repeated for generations, that Serena eventually showed up at his studio, decided the painting was finished, and drove off with it before he could put another stroke on the canvas. He died of a stroke and the Spanish flu in February 1918, never seeing what happened to it. For the Lederers, this canvas was one piece of an enormous collection. Klimt's philosophy, his jurisprudence, the Beethoven frieze. At least 16 major Klimts, some considered even at the time his finest work. Then, 1938, the Anschluss. Hitler annexed Austria. The Lederers were Jewish, and within months their bank accounts, their homes, their art collection, everything was confiscated. The family fled. Serena to Budapest, Erich to Switzerland. Elisabeth, divorced and in her 40s, stayed in Vienna. Under Nazi law, she was a Voljudin, a full Jew. The deportations were already underway. Her death was only a matter of time. Then Serena from Budapest, terrified for her daughter, wrote an affidavit. She swore under oath that Elisabeth was not the biological daughter of her Jewish husband. Her real father, Serena claimed, was Gustav Klimt, the notorious philanderer. Why not one more? The Nazis believed it, not because the evidence was strong. There was none. They believed it because they wanted to. By 1938, Klimt was being reclaimed as a great Aryan painter, a treasure of the Reich. Producing one more Klimt heir flattered the regime, and Elisabeth happened to have a former brother-in-law who was now a senior Nazi official in Vienna. He pushed the paperwork through. Elisabeth was legally reclassified, no longer a full Jew, now illegitimate, half-Aryan, exempt from deportation. She lived out the war in Vienna and died of a severe illness on October 19, 1944, in her own bed. The lie had worked. But here's the part nobody expects. The same Jewishness the family was fleeing, the Jewishness the affidavit was built to deny, was also what saved this painting. When the Nazis triaged the Lederer collection, they sent the important Klimts to Schloss Immendorf, a castle in Lower Austria, for safekeeping. But portraits of Jewish sitters were considered tainted, worthless, not worth the freight. Bildnis. Elisabeth Lederer was left behind at the Dorotheum auction house in Vienna. On May 8, 1945, the last day of the war in Europe, the retreating SS torched Schloss Immendorf to keep the art from Allied hands. At least 10 Lederer Klimts burned. Some accounts say 16. Philosophy, jurisprudence, medicine. The faculty paintings, considered by many art historians his masterpieces, are gone. They exist now only in black and white reproductions. This painting, left behind in Vienna because the Nazis considered it polluted by the woman in it, survived. Look again at her robe. 2 dragons rising out of crested waves. An emperor's cloak, painted onto a 20-year-old Jewish woman in Vienna by a man who couldn't stop tinkering with the canvas until her mother drove off with it. The lie that saved her was anchored to the painter. The painting that survived because of her. And the cloak, the impossible cloak, the one she had no right to wear, the one that took her all the way out of her own century, turned out to be exactly what she needed. Klimt didn't know he was painting a talisman. He was painting his patron's daughter. But by the time the smoke cleared at Immendorf, this was the only portrait of its scale left intact. The woman inside it had outlived the regime that wanted her dead. She is the painting. The painting is her. And both, against every probability, are still here. If this story stayed with you, please like and subscribe. There are more paintings out there carrying more secrets, and I'll keep bringing them to you, one by one.